I wanted to create a video to show how to manipulate the files that come from WorldWorks games to work with the Cameo, the Silhouette Cameo, and in particular the Silhouette Studio software provided with the Cameo. In a previous video, I showed how to get around issues with the registration marks. WorldWorks Games does provide cut files, but they don't work out of the box with the Silhouette Cameo. Please see my other video if you would like to see how to just use the cut files they've provided and use the images that that you purchase. While going through the set I purchased, this Thalmont's building set, it's the only set I have, and this scenario may be different in other cases, but in this case I found while setting up cut files that the stairs appear to be a little bit inefficient. For example, if I wanted a 1.5 inch wide staircase, I would have to print page 1, page 2 to get the side of the staircase, and page 3 to get the rise and run image. Same holds true for any 3-inch wide staircases you might want to make. Now, I'm not saying that you might not want to create all the sizes of staircases, but if you only wanted one, you would end up printing all of this imagery on all these pages, and using the cutter, you would end up, if you created a cut file, you would have to cut all of these out. And that's fairly inefficient both in terms of paper, ink, and the lifespan of the cutting mat provided with a Cameo. After a certain amount of cuts, you're going to need to reapply some adhesive to it, or if you want to take the easy way out, go and buy a new one. So in this video, I want to show how to simplify these or condense these so that each .studio file or Cameo Studio file contains all the material to make one staircase. So I'm going to consolidate them. So if I needed 1.5 inches, I can print it and cut it and create just that staircase. So to get started, the first thing we need to do is we need to create a file format that's usable inside of the Silhouette Studio software. The only thing I've found so far are images. So using Adobe Acrobat Professional, this will not work with just a Reader. Reader does not have the ability to save as images, though you could find other conversion tools out there, I'm sure. I'm going to go ahead and choose to save this as a PNG file. Now, I understand TIFF images are higher resolution, but the PNG file automatically preserves the page size, which means no scaling is necessary once I bring it into Silhouette Studio. I'm doing this for simplicity's sake. You could create the TIFF file, go in, modify the properties inside of the file to set the DPI and get everything to match up, but it's going to be a lot of extra time, and I just have an HP desktop printer anyway. So we'll choose to save these. I'm just going to simply overwrite all the existing files that I've already created. We'll do this for each instance. I guess I could hit the checkbox to say don't ask me this again. And now that the PNG files are saved, we'll leave the PDF document open. But let's go over to Silhouette Studio and let's start a new project. By default, there's always a new project file ready to go. First thing we want to do is we want to set up to work with the cardstock I'm using, which in my case is letter size. So we just need to set that up so we're not using a full 12 by 12. And then once we have that, we can start working with those image files. Now, to import them, you want to either do an open or a merge operation. Opening will just open an individual file. Merging will import the individual images into the current document. Usually for the first one, I would start with an open, but we'll go ahead and use merge. So we need 3 elements. We need pages 1, 2, and 3 as we discussed. So let's start with page 1, and you can see that the page comes in with all the graphics on it, and you can drag it around. Silhouette Studio treats each image as though it's an object, and this is really what we're going to be dealing with here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to merge each one of these pages in, and I'm just going to separate them out because we need a few elements from each one of these. So let's do the last one. So this gives us all the content we're looking for, and you'll notice it kind of grays out when we get off the page. I pull it off the page to make it easier to work with, and we can just lay those sheets off to the side. And what we want to do is we want to crop or remove this information right here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to zoom in on this. And to crop, we need to create an outline. Now, before we do that, there's a perforation line here it can be hard to see because the dots aren't on the image. So using some of the drawing tools, there's a few different things we can do. I'm actually going to start right off the bat by drawing this perforation line because we're going to remove those dotted lines from the image later. Now the first tip here is when you're drawing anything inside of Silhouette Studio, holding the Shift key will snap, if you're used to tools like AutoCAD, to the orthogonal positions, horizontal, 45 degrees, and 90. So I'm going to hold Shift and I'm going to drag that down, and then I'm going to go ahead and simply select it, and we're going to change its cutting style. So I'm going to go to the Cut Style window. I'm going to specify that that's a perforation line right there. We'll go ahead and we could do that in a few other places as well. For example, we may want this perforation line, and keep in mind the order you do this isn't critical. The other advantage of making sure that these lines are horizontal is you can drag these grips without breaking the horizontal line that's been created there. So it's kind of nice to do that. I'm going to go ahead and drag this one down. I'm going to have to freehand that a little bit. And if you're unsure about it, you can always zoom in, select the entity, right-click on it, and you can always choose to edit the points. Once you do that, it will get out of that cut mode, which I find to be a lot easier to work in, and I actually wish you could view that. The other thing to keep in mind, you don't have access to zoom, pan, and rotate from the middle mouse wheel. You can scroll up and down with a scroll wheel, but most graphical applications you zoom in and out with a mouse wheel or Alt in the mouse wheel, and you can pan with a mouse wheel. You can't do that inside of this software. I found that to be probably one of the most frustrating things coming from a CAD background myself. Selecting these entities can also be a bit challenging. You can see here I'm actually it's grabbing the page behind it by default. So you have to be a little bit it takes a little getting used to figuring out how to grab those entities in just the right spot. See there, I grabbed the page, and sometimes it'll take a few tries to get that just right. And then we'll drop that perforated line on there. And again, we can resize this. Keep in mind, it really doesn't matter if your perforations extend outside of this area. The only place you wouldn't want to do that would be right here. So we've done the perforations first. Usually I don't go in that order, but let's go ahead and continue on. The next thing we want to do is we want to cut this out. To do that, we're going to use the polygon tool. We're going to do this all in one single operation. I need to drag that perforation back a little bit. So grab the polygon tool, and all we're going to do is trace this, just like you would do with your blade. And we're going to go ahead and select a start point, and again, using the Shift key, we're going to lock in our horizontal, and then we'll just kind of freehand up at an angle. Again, use Shift, use the scroll bars. Very, very frustrating. You'll notice I snap oftentimes because sometimes these lines are at 45 degrees, and you can use the snap there. It makes it just a little bit more accurate in my mind. I'm a little OCD. I'm not going to be for this video, just for speed's sake. We'll outline this whole shape. For instance, that last line didn't look very good. And you could always, if you screw up, you can press Control-Z to go back and redo that last line you just started on. And then when you get to your last endpoint, when you click it, it'll close it off for you. So we're going to go ahead and do a zoom to fit. And you can see that we have that line. We're going to select that, and then with the Shift key, Control does not work in this software. Like other graphical applications, you can't press Control to select multiple entities. And then we'll select the page, which happens to be behind that. Once we do that, we can go up and use some of the Modify tools, and we'll simply crop out that page. If we go back to the cutting window, we can see that our outline has disappeared using crop, however. This is easily solved. Simply select the image and simply set that it has a cut edge on it or a cut on it. I'm going to use cut edge so it always cuts the outline profile. Now, we're going to want to position this on our sheet, but before I do that, you'll notice if you go ahead and simply just grab the image, the perforations will be left behind. What you want to do is you want to select all these entities and right mouse click and choose to group them. This can also be done at the bottom. Here you can group and ungroup. So I'm going to go ahead and use group. If you watch videos online, a lot of people use compound paths. I'm not exactly sure what the difference is. Grouping is a simple enough thing for me to understand. So there's our one side with the folds on it and the depth, the 1.5 inch depth. So we're going to go through this process again. Exciting. In this case here again we have 3 duplicates. Now if you've already done this once before, you can save yourself a lot of time. Simply go ahead and merge the pre-existing file you've done that with. So in this case I've already done the 1 inch stairs. So I'm going to merge those in, and here you can see how the grouping, the outline grouping works. If you overlap, it will combine those. This is the entity we need. We don't need this object or this object. So saved us a bunch of time there because all those sides are identical, and that leaves us with the last and probably the hardest piece right here. To start, we're going to go ahead and we're going to outline it, and again, you could outline it the same way we had done before, but I'm going to show you a few other tricks you can do here. I'm going to start by just kind of freehanding a rectangle, and then I'm going to go ahead and select it, and I'm going to use the grips that are provided to capture just the outside of this shape. And again, I like to work inside of this cutting mode window. You may want to work in the graphical image if you prefer. I find it a little bit harder to see the cutting line where it sits on the geometry, but you're going to want to find out what works best for you. Scroll down a little bit or a lot. We want to find that grip on the outside and on the bottom. So here you can see I'm working on the outsides first. I'm not putting the perforation lines in this time first. And I'm going to go ahead and grab that outside perimeter. I'm going to do my best to line it up without having to zoom in too far. Again, you can spend more time if you want. This time again, we're going to go ahead and we're going to choose to crop this. Alright, so if we do that, however, all that's going to do is grab the outside. So we want to cut out these pieces right here. We're going to look at some time-saving tools to make this process a little bit easier. I want to make sure that all my edges line up nice and straight when I do this. So one of the things we'll do to do this is, again, we'll use the polygon tool here. And when I deal with angles, again, I get a little OCD when it comes to this. So you'll notice what I'm going to do. I'm going to, we're going to go ahead and use this polygon tool. Hold Shift, drag up, and then what we'll do here is we'll just create an arbitrary angle. And once we've done that, we can go ahead and we can say edit points. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to match this angle right here. So we're going to drag this in. Now, this is the one thing I found that I don't like. If you use a polygon, notice it won't snap into place right there. So if you want to get really precise, one of the other ways you can do this, and this is how I've actually done mine, in fact I should have just started it this way, is use the rectangle, use those grips to line everything up nice and perfect. Like so. And then just make sure the top edge of this is up beyond here. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to use another polygon. Now this is something I found I really don't care for in this software. And that's, it looks like I'm having some performance issues, probably because of my recording software, and I'm running full screen resolution. So we'll edit points. Now, we'll go ahead and just match that line up. So you have to use closed profiles. This is something else I find frustrating, having used tools like you can see SolidWorks down here at the bottom, or older tools like AutoCAD. You have to work with closed regions, and the region you want to cut with always has to be on top. You can see I can just go ahead and do a subtract, and now I've got that matched up. Now I need to redo that, but I want the angles and the edges all to match perfectly. So we're going to use some of the other tools inside of the software. We're going to start by selecting this shape. We're going to choose the replicate window, and we're going to choose to just create a column of 4 of these. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do, we'll zoom in, we'll start with this one, and we're going to look at lining them up on the bottom. Same thing here. You'll notice I'm not doing a very good job of their X position. I'm just getting them located in the Y, and that's because we're going to go ahead and select the top one, which was placed correctly the first time, and then we're going to go ahead and use the align tool, and we're going to align them all to left. Now sometimes you get that where what it wants to do is it wants to put them all there, but that's fine. All I'm really looking for in this case is this left edge to be the same and this angle to be the same on all these. Now you'll notice this guy down here is down a little bit. They do have, you can nudge using your arrow keys just a slight bit. So once I have that, we'll zoom out a little bit. I want to replicate that over to the other side. We'll select all these guys, hold down the shift key to deselect the image, and on the replication tab we'll choose to mirror that to the left hand side. With those guys still selected, we'll go ahead and drag them over, and I'm kind of eyeballing it from zoomed way out here, but you can zoom in to get these exactly where you want them. And if you really want to get fussy, you can go and align them all by bottom at that point. At this point, you're probably going, well, it'd just be easier to trace the whole thing, and you're probably right. So what we're going to go ahead and do, we're going to select all these. It's just going to make the next step a single click instead of multiples. We're going to right click and group those. Then we'll select those in the image, use the modify tool, and subtract. We just have to do this in one more spot. We're almost done. Down here. Alright, and for this we'll just make it nice and easy. We'll go ahead and just now you want to start off your part most of the time. Yeah, I've got some weird stuff going on, probably because I'm recording this. It's fine. We can make do and fix that later. Alright, so let's go ahead. Let's edit the points. This one should be up here. And again, I'm going to make sure that I'm cutting off from the part here. So you'll notice on my outside lines, I just make sure that they go out beyond the part. And like we did before, we'll choose to reuse that geometry, and we'll mirror that over to the left. And we'll just hold down the arrow key, or we'll drag it. I'm going to get it as close as I can. And I'm going to select these two. I'm going to choose to align those about their bottoms, just so that it's the same across both sides. And then again, I'm going to select these as a together. I'm going to group them, modify, shift to select the image, and subtract. Now all that's left, we have to go ahead and add our perforations. Now here's another area where you're probably going to run into it where you want them to be perfect. Again, notice I'm using the shift key here. Sometimes you accidentally create extra stuff. Go over to the cut window style, change that to a perforation. We do want to set the image to have a cut outline on it. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do, oops, zoomed way in, that's fine. We're going to drag this over the perforated edges here. And drag over there. And there's a perforation at each one of these zones. Again, this is probably a place where it would have made sense to capture this information early on. So there's going to be one here, and then there's going to be one basically at every cut that we're making right there. So what we're going to do for this is we're just going to go ahead and draw these lines, perforate. So there's going to be one there. And we'll set this one up. And then what we're going to go ahead and do, we're actually going to do this a little bit differently in this case. I just thought of something that might be a bit easier. You know what? Yeah. Let's just speed up this whole process and let's use the rectangle tool. So sometimes you come across things you didn't think about the first time you did it, and then when you're recording you do. So now this will present a bit of a challenge here, but I should be able to select this guy and this guy and set the align right. See, what I don't like about this software is you never know. Let's do a bring to front. Which object gets held in place and which one doesn't? Here you can see I'm struggling grabbing that. Apparently, you cannot get those guys to move together, so this would be a good place to use a group. Let's go back to this window so we can see that a little bit more clearly. And we want to make sure we grab that line we're looking for. I just wanted to make sure they were lined up there. That's why I kind of spent a little bit of time doing that. And we'll set that to perforate. And we're going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to grab this guy and that guy, and we'll choose to align those left. See, there it went just fine. Set that to perforate. Drag that down, drag that up. And we know we had our rectangle right, so let's just go ahead and select all these and make those a group. Then we can move that whole group like so. There, that looks all right. Now I could go through and finish this up, but I wanted to get to the last part, and that's when you're done, you're going to want to go ahead and you're going to want to group all these entities like we had done before, fit it onto the sheet. And the last thing we need to do at this point is we need to make sure that everything's going to be in a print area and adhere to the margins. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to turn on the registration marks we'll be using. I'm going to go ahead and set mine to use a 1/2 inch margin. And then I'll work within that area. They say not to create anything inside of these blacked out areas. I haven't had any problems with it. Drag this guy up here. And then this one, you can see it's a little bit tight right there. So what we're going to go ahead and do is select that object and use the rotate tool. And I'm going to use precise numbers here. I'm going to say 90 degrees, and I'm going to drag that over. Drag that down, and you can see here that we have all the objects to create our 1.5 inch staircase on one sheet. All that's left to do is save this. We'll save over, make these 1.5 inch, which I actually already have. Yes, we'll go ahead and replace it. Again, you're going to want to go through and add the rest of the perforation marks into that, but now when you want to create a 1.5 inch wide staircase, you can use just this one file. You can print directly from inside Silhouette Studio and cut from here. Hope this helps.